Here we go. Tanu Rabbanan Mitzvas Chanukah. Continuing on with this whole thing about Chanukah, and now that we're still kind of doing the deep dive, but we're also still starting to find out our answers to things. All the different questions about like what's the focus on the oil, and why is the menorah that we light on Chanukah different than the menorah in the base of Mikdash, and the time that we light it is different. All these kinds of questions. What's the deal with the bowls? So we already had the idea that the punchline of everything is that the point of the Chanukah menorah is supposed to illuminate the darkness, the spiritual darkness that we live in. Which is why we had such a focus on the oil specifically, because oil doesn't, it's separateness, so it's holiness, things like that. We got into the whole idea about how the Chanukah story, the Chanukah miracle, wasn't just a physical victory, it was very specifically a spiritual victory that they were fighting. They were fighting against this Greek intention of taking divinity and God out of the Torah and mitzvahs. Study it as a book of poetry, of philosophy, and stories, but get the God element out of it. And that's specifically what the Jewish people were fighting for. And part of all this is that to win a victory like this, where the Greeks, the impurities that they wanted to bring in, saturated and went so deep, they removed the seal of the high priest from the oil. They just defiled it. They didn't even have to just break it all. They just had to make it impure for use in the base of Mikdash. They just talk about like what a deep level, a high level spirituality that this defilement reached. So the Jewish people, to win that battle, to win the war, had to dig in even higher, had to go even deeper, closer to the essence of a Jewish person, which cannot be touched by these impurities. That coreness of a Jewish person, which when we look at the 5 levels of the soul, that's called the Yechida. The Yechida is the essence of the soul. That is a place where self-sacrifice can occur because it transcends everything. Self-sacrifice is something that's transcendent from the whole world because it's past the point of self-preservation to sacrifice the self. Until there, everything's about, well, at least the lower levels definitely, because we have to live to do Torah mitzvahs. Here comes a point where it's even beyond all that. So we have the Yechida, that's what they have to tap into, the essential self kind of. That was the spiritual victory. The physical victory, we saw that when the Maccabees, they engaged this war that by the rules of nature, they had no chance of winning. But the biggest thing that we went through last time is that it comes to a point where there is no other option. It can be no other way. So there's not a point of logic, because as soon as you're bringing in logic, you could argue, you could rationalize anything. Even to say the logic we have reached is that we must have ultimate faith, because that's still a logical conclusion that you've reached, even to logically say we're at a point of faith. The Yechida, that this essence that we're reaching, goes even beyond anything that's logic. It's just there is no other option. There's no discussion because there is nothing else. There's no discussion, there's no rationality, there's nothing. There's nothing but this is it. That's the level that they had to reach to get there. The conclusion of that the victory that they fought in Chanukah was such a complete victory because it's something that was all the way from the essence, but it's also, which is kind of removed from everything, but it's also something that still feeds everything, that still permeates everything. And that we kind of see with oil, that oil separates, but it also saturates. A verse that's brought in from the Torah now, this is Hashem was talking to Yitzchak and saying, all the things I did for your father and going to come on to you, etc., the blessings, and you're the inheritor of Avram's legacy, I guess you could say, and the mandates and all that stuff. And so it says, because Avram listened to my voice. But if you look at the word Akev could also mean Akev, which means a heel. That's where the name Yaakov comes from, because Yaakov was holding on to Esav's heel when they were born. Avram was so consumed with and so dedicated to and devoted to the word of God that all the way down to his heel. Even Avram's heel listened to God's voice. It was so much a part of him. Basically what we're trying to get to is this level where we're so subsumed in the will of God that even down to the heel, which seems the lowest of the low, that even that goes along with God's will. Which, hold that thought for a second, we're going to get back to it. One of the things that we have, going back to this whole idea about how the victory was so complete because it came from a place that's so supra-rational, from above. Well, it was above the rational service and even super-rational service that's based on the rational, because there could be no opposition to Yechidas, and you can't oppose the essence. It simply is. There's no discussion there. So it's a point where materiality can also be transformed at that level. Which is kind of like when we spoke about with Tanya, how the tzaddik it's not just about saying no. Remember the sweet work and the savory work? So the whole thing with the savory work is that our job is to say no. We just have to resist. And the tzaddik's work was to turn darkness into light. The level of the essence is where darkness can actually be turned into light. That's the power of this essence. The new part now it goes back to, with this idea that we have with the essence and transforming and all that kind of stuff, it goes back to this idea of why does the menorah that we light has 8 lights in it and the menorah in the base of Mikdash had 7 lights to it. Why is it 8 and 7 instead of, we should also be lighting 7? Why is that? As we've kind of said before, because the number 8 is a number of transcendence. It transcends the natural order. This is something we spoke about, I think, all the way in the beginning of this. And we spoke about it also, I think, the whole Shema thing. 7 is a complete cycle. 7 is considered the complete cycle of the natural order of things because the world was created in 7 days. Shabbos was rested, but 7 is a week. So 7 represents a complete natural order of things. 8 represents a level of transcendence. It goes above the natural order. Here we have this word hashtalshalos. Hashtalshalos means a chain. So what they call is the chain of creation. Because of the way creation is and the different levels and the overlapping layers, the journey of the holiness and the godliness down into this world to be able to create the world, it's called the chain of descent. Not going to tell the details of it now, but that's what's considered. So it's called Hishtalshalos. Because 7 represents the natural order of things. That's a complete week. That is the natural order of things. God created the world, which is the introduction of nature. You're basically making nature happen in this creation of the world, which happened in 7 days. That's Hishtalshalos. And 8 is a number above Hishtalshalos. So that's part of why, because it connects back to the victory. The victory is something that came from a level that's transcendent, that's above the natural order of things, which is where Yechida, the essence, comes from, and also the thing about the physical victory. We light 8 candles, not just because they lit it for the one day and it split up and then it burned for 8 days, etc. Also, it's part of it, blowing it from the deeper point of view because we're talking about something transcendent. The whole thing of Chanukah is that it transcends the natural order of the world. The Maccabees, those who fought, they fought to drive the Greeks out, they fought to restore the Beis Hamikdash, etc., etc., that came from a level beyond the natural order of things. So that's why the Hanukkah lights that we light is 8 versus 7. And then the other thing that it brings in is that for another example of this 8 and 7 thing, is it talks about the harp that was played in the Beis Hamikdash, because the Kohanim, the priests, would do the service of the temple. They would bring the sacrifices. They would mix the incense. They all had different jobs with maintenance and taking care of different things in the Beis Hamikdash. A lot of it was really with the sacrifices. Whatever it was, they all had their different jobs that they did. The Leviim, the Levites, what did they do? They provided the musical accompaniment. Among the other things, the other duties. But that was one of the main things that they did. Music, and that it's also this level above words and what music does for the soul and all the kind of things. This is why this accompanied the service. Not just because it was nice to have a choir there. So harp of the Beis Hamikdash was a 7-string harp. And when Mashiach is going to come, instead of the 7-string harp, it's going to be an 8-string harp. Same idea, because when we think about what the temple in Jerusalem was, when you think about what the Beis Hamikdash was, that was the highest point of holiness within the natural order of things. That was the holiest place in the whole world. There were different miracles that occurred in the Beis Hamikdash, etc., but it was still part of this world. We had reached the epitome of holiness in the building of the Beis Hamikdash. God's presence was felt there. It was a place there that was transcendent, but it was also a place within the natural order of things. It was a building. It was a physical building that unfortunately it could, and it was destroyed. So the Beis Hamikdash represented that. It represents this ultimate of the complete cycle, the ultimate of holiness within the natural order of things. Mashiach is going to come. The world's going to be different. We are going to now enter this new phase that's beyond the natural order, because that's Mashiach's time. It's going to be different. That's why the harp of Mashiach is going to have 8 strings and not 7 strings. Now, once we're on the subject of harp already, check this out. The Hebrew word for harp is kinor. Kinor is a kaf, a nun, a vav, and a resh. So you switch it around, you get kaf and vav, chaf vav, and nun and resh. Chaf and vav, gematrias. The kaf is 20, and the vav is 6. 26. Does that number sound familiar to anyone? The Sephardim we're very into 18, they're very into 26. We do 18 because it's high, especially Sephardim will do 26 because it's the numerical equivalent of the Shem Havaya. Remember we did Havaya and Elokim? So Elokim is the name of nature, and Havaya is the transcendent. It's the name of beyond nature. It's where the entire power of creation came to Elokim, etc. That also made it called Mach Bechad. So if you look at just the letters, there's a Yud which is 10, there's a Hey which is 5, there's a Vav which is 6, and then there's a Hey which is 5. And for those keeping track at home, that's 26. Back to Kinor, the Chaf and the Vav is 26, which is Shem Havaya, the transcendent name of God. And Ner is a candle, bright light. We've actually seen this phrase before in Tanya. Ner Havaya Nishmas Adam, Ner Shem Nishmas Adam, from Proverbs. The soul of man is a godly light. When we did it in Tanya, it's because the soul of man is a candle of God, that we had the whole thing with the wick and the oil, the mitzvahs that we do, because that keeps the flame burning, flame of godliness to burn on us. A wise man knows what's above his head. And what's above your head is that the divine presence dwells above you. How do you keep the divine presence dwelling above you? Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the candle of God is like the soul of man. Because how does a flame keep burning? How do you have a clear light that burns? The best way to have a clear and pure light is with an oil. Because you could have a wax thing, but usually you get like dark smoke from it. Or if you have a wick that's not dipped into anything, it's just kind of and nothing happens. So how do we feed the light is with mitzvahs that we do. That's Tanya. Going back here, Chavav is 26, Nun Resh is Ner. This is from the word Kinor. So Ner Vayin Nishmas Adam, that the soul of man is a godly light. What it's trying to show is that this harp, this is going to elicit also transcendent levels of godliness. It's going to elicit this name of God that's beyond the natural order of things. It's just rounding out the connection of this 8-string harp being something that's above and beyond. Therefore, what do we have with all this? Now we go through why we're lighting the candles at sunset. Why do we light the candles at sunset? Because this light that we're listening is a light that cannot be concealed. Even darkness can't conceal it. Because this light is above the world, because this light is beyond the world, darkness cannot get involved in it. It cannot tamp it down. And it's not just that the darkness is going to be illuminated. The darkness itself is going to be transformed into light. We see that going back to the original Gemara. The Gemara originally spoke about with Chanukah. It said, Ad shetech l'regel min hashuk, v'ad kama, amar Rabba bar Chana, amar Rabbi Yochanan, ad d'chalia rigla tamidai. It says we have to light the candles from sunset until traffic in the marketplace ceases, until the feet cease in the marketplace. Well, what time is that? Where is that on the hourglass? Where does that come up on the sundial? Where do they have the little feet there? Rabba bar Chana said, that Rabbi Yochanan said, until the feet of the Tamidai cease. So who's the Tamidai? So he said the Tamidai were the people who used to sell the wood in the marketplace. So what's the ideal time for lighting the menorah? From sundown until the feet of the Tamidai, the wood sellers cease. But what's the thing? People would go home, oh, we need more wood, we go back. So once people stop coming back for wood, there's no one left in the marketplace. Traffic ceases. Why is that? Because we're lighting the Hanukkah candles. Remember, we're supposed to light it outside so people should see it. The whole thing with the Hanukkah lights is we want to publicize the miracle that God did for us. It's to illuminate in the darkness, yes. But part of why, especially from all the holidays, we have so many big public parties with Hanukkah. We want to get out there to the malls. That's how we translate it today. The reason why we're getting out there to the malls and all that kind of stuff is not just because it's 8 days and we ran out of stuff to do. It's because the whole thing of Hanukkah is publicizing it. That's why we have the menorahs on the cars. We want people to see it. You got to see it. Back in those days, the only time someone's going to see it is when there's traffic. There's foot traffic. So when is there foot traffic? From sunset, which is the darkness, it has to be illuminated until the last wood seller goes home. After that point, there's no one walking in the marketplace anymore, which metaphorically means the job is done. That's why that's the time frame. Why are we picking on the Tamidai? Why are we picking on the wood sellers? So the name Tamidai, you can see it's kind of spelled out here. The Hebrew word that it comes from, or that it's connected to, is Moredis b'malchus, which means rebellion, those who rebel against the kingdom of heaven. So it's a symbolic thing about those who rebel, meaning they who remain in the marketplace is a place of public domain. Tanya refers to it as Turei Defruda, which is peaks of separation, those who hold themselves above and separate. Not like the oil separate the holy way, but those who with their haughtiness holds themselves above. As in those who rebel against heaven. This is what the Tamidai, this is what they're symbolizing right now, which we're getting from the name. We're doing the deep dive here. So it doesn't mean that they remain in the market. Those who remain in the market, which is a public domain. What's the public domain? What it symbolizes is the public domain is a place where they say like anything goes in the public domain. There's a lot of factors at work here. There's a lot of people in charge in the public domain versus the private domain. Private ownership, there's only one person in charge. This is my house, my way. Versus the marketplace, they're like, well, what happens in Vegas? Anything goes. So we're lighting the Hanukkah candles to illuminate the darkness. Not just that the darkness should be illuminated, we want to bring light into the darkness, but to the point that the darkness itself will become light. And we see that because the time frame that we have is from sunset until the footsteps of the Tamidai leave. Which remember I said hold on to the idea about the heels over there? We're talking about the footsteps, right? Until even the feet did. Until even they're coming. Why are they considered the symbol of those who rebel against heaven? So not just because we had fun wordplay here. Because it's those who insist that the world is a place of public domain. Those who stand in the marketplace where they're like, the world is chaos. Everybody's in charge. You're a god and you're a god and you're a god. Those people that they have like, oh, you believe in that? The haughty ones. Those who hold themselves above. Not in a kosher kind of way. Those who hold themselves above, not in the oil kind of way. As in those who rebel against the kingdom of heaven. Those who say there's not only one God. There's not private ownership. The place is a place of public domain. Until even they will come in. Until even they have left the marketplace. Symbolically, even there we're like, maybe the world is a place of private domain. Maybe there is only one ruler. Now we know that our job is done. Now we have lit the candles until we fully accomplish what we're supposed to accomplish here. It actually takes the phrase here from the Gemara, until it ceases. When we look at it in the Hebrew, we say there's two different ways that we kind of see where this word comes from. This dechalia word comes from. So one word is dechala. So until it destroys. As it destroys the feet of the Tamidai, as in until they are not opposition anymore. Until they're no longer enemies to the divine will. They no longer oppose it. So we've destroyed the enemy part of them. But there's a second word here. The second word is kilayan. Kilayan means to yearn, to desire. We're not just illuminating the darkness, we're turning the darkness into light. So we're going to light the Hanukkah candles, which all of it that it symbolizes with the Eid and the Chidah, until the point where even those who rebelled against heaven will actually have a yearning for godliness. Down to their feet. Even the feet of the Tamidai will have a yearning for godliness. So it's a two-part here. It's a twofer about, that we keep saying, not just illuminating the darkness, but actually turn the darkness into light. Which, again, it all connects to this whole idea of essence. It can only happen when the light that's shining forth, when the power of the light that's being brought forth is the light of essence. Because every other kind of light, which we've kind of seen up until now with the miracle, any other kind of light could get tainted. Any other light can actually have some darkness. It won't have complete victory over the darkness. Because we're looking for complete victory over the darkness. If not, we're still stuck. Well, we're still stuck here in the exile, aren't we? So the victory of the darkness is not fully complete yet. We don't have the third base of Mikdash yet. But it's how they come, the deep, deep essence of ourselves. We're not rationalizing anymore. We're not getting into the discussion and the conversation. Not just, obviously, to learn, yes. But why I need to be doing this or that. And we dive into it because there is no other option. We illuminate the darkness, and we can also turn the darkness into light. Now we can finally talk about the bowls of sukkahs. Now that we've had all that, we can finally talk, what does any of this have to do with the bowls of sukkahs? First of all, there's this idea that the sukkah that we're in, this is kind of like a deeper understanding of sukkah. It's not just this little hut thing that we sit in, and of course it's the clouds of glory, all the other explanation for it. But taking it deeper, sitting in the sukkah represents a level of godliness that surrounds us. Remember, going back to Tanya, remember how we spoke about there's a personalized life force, and then there's the surrounding life force. The personalized one is something that can actually be tailored to each individual, versus there's a level that's much higher than that it can't be contained within an individual. So it just kind of surrounds us. The individualized life force, that's something that is like clothing that is tailored to fit to me. Versus, let's say, if you're in a house. So the house just surrounds us. It provides shelter, but it surrounds. It's not tailored. Anyone could go inside. It's not tailored to only one individual. That's the difference between kind of like the light forces. So there's light that's personalized to me, and then there's one that's a surrounding one because it's a much higher level. So it surrounds. You can't squish it in. The sukkah on this deeper level, that's what it represents. You mean it's like getting a hug. You're getting embraced by and engulfed by. But when we call it the sukkah, again for the deeper level, it's a revelation of a transcendent divine light. It's a light that's so great and so much higher that again you can't be squished in. It can't be specifically tailored. It's called the level of makifim, that it's a surrounding light. It's a very, very high level. That is what sukkah represents, a transcendent divine light. You started to see how the connection is going to come in? So, what happens? Sukkot is also 8 days. 7 days versus 8th day, we know. 8th day is a day of transcendent. What's the 8th day of Sukkot? The 8th day of Sukkot is called Shmini Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres doesn't celebrate anything except for the fact that we're staying another day. There's no we're celebrating the clouds of glory, it's the harvest season. The 8th day is just us and God. That's what the 8th day, Shmini Atzeres of Sukkot is all about. What it is that all this light that we've been surrounded with until now, we're bringing it inward now. Now we're going to try to incorporate it kind of like within ourselves. We're having this light that we've been having over the last 7 days. It's time to make it like part of us. That's kind of what Shmini Atzeres is. So here we have the 8 days. 8, which we know is 7 plus 1. We get to 8. 7 is, again, this word Hishtalshelus, which is the natural order of things. That chain of descent. It's the completion of the 7-day cycle. That's the creation, natural order of things. And the 1, what's 1? 1 is God. God is He who transcends the natural order of things. 8th day of Sukkot, we are tapping into, drawing down He who transcends and drawing Him down into the natural order. We're bringing the 1 into the 7, and that's how we get 8. That's what happens on the 8th day. Connecting that now, we see how it's kind of going to connect. The Chanukah lights are going to affect the feet of the Talmidei, as in those who rebel against heaven. And by rebel against heaven can mean either explicitly those who like deny godliness, those who are explicitly anti kind of things, idolaters, I guess you could say. But it's not just that. It can be anybody, either explicitly or not, who's just against the godly message of God. So obviously that could be a massive range of types. So the Chanukah lights, we know they're going to affect the feet of the Talmidei. Even to down them, there's going to be a yearning and transforming the light and etc. The same way that the bowls of Sukkot affect the 70 nations of the world. So here I'm going to show you, which I guess we'll wrap up with this. If you remember, we spoke about the bowls of sacrifices. They started with 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. And altogether it becomes 70. And the 70 represents the 70 nations of the world. That's what Beis Shammai said. That's why you're supposed to go down. You're supposed to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to parallel that. Part of the question is where'd you get the connection? So now we're starting to see. If we look at it deeper, we see that there might actually be a connection between the Chanukah lights and the bowls of Sukkot. Because we know now the Chanukah lights, they are supposed to affect us and illuminate the darkness, even to the point that those who deny godliness, those who deny God, even they will be brought in. They won't just be like, oh, I see the light, but hey, I also want the light. This connects to the bowls of Sukkot. Which again, remember, Hillel doesn't deny that that's a connection. It doesn't say, no, that's not the connection. He just says, okay, I hear your reason, but the reason why we're going to do 1 to 8 is because you have to add to levels of holiness. They didn't deny either side of the argument. They just said, the reason why we do what we do is not because of your reason, but because of my reason. So let's look at how do the bowls of Sukkot affect the nations of the world? Because we see that we have 70. 70 represent the 7 parent nations of the world. It also talks about the 70 languages of the world because the 70 parent nations of the world. We say Mordechai knew the 70 languages of the world. That's why he was able to understand what the guards were talking about when they plotted to overthrow Achashverosh. Kind of set a lot of things in motion there. Because Mordechai was part of the Sanhedrin. They had to know the 70 languages, etc. We didn't just make up the number 70. It comes from somewhere. Actually get it because when they count Noach's descendants, they get to the number 70. Noach's family repopulated the earth. So when they count the main families there, that's how they get to 70. And that's why that became the number. Everybody came from there. So we see now, this is the verse in the Torah. It says, and their meal offerings and their libations for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, according to the number as prescribed. Okay, this is the way it describes about the offerings that are going to be brought. Rashi comments on it. So Rashi, who's the foremost commentator on the Torah, he's commenting on this. That what does he say? The bulls of Sukkot, there were 70. Keneged, Shivim, Umos, Shematat Vachim, Siman, Klei Lehem, Amikdash, Shemigin, Alem, Benisur. What does Rashi say? That when it talks about their meal offerings and libations for the bulls, so Rashi is commenting on part of this verse. The 70 bulls of the Sukkot festival corresponded to the 70 nations, which progressively decrease in number, symbolizing their, as in the nations, destruction. At the time of the temple, they had the sacrifice shielded them from adversity. We're going to talk about what that means here quickly. Rashi is giving us two things. He's saying the bulls that were offered on Sukkot, 70, they represent the 70 nations. And the reason why they lessen, they go from 13 to 12, whatever, because it represents the destruction of the nations. Which, hang on there for a second. The destruction of the nations, that they decrease in number. Another thing is that when, at the time of the temples and when the Beis HaMikdash stood, the sacrifices shielded them from adversity. As in, these sacrifices that were offered of the 70 bulls actually were a protection for the nations of the world. This greater thing that was going on there that was done for them, which, trust the commentaries to get in on this. First, connecting it to what we're talking about here, when we talk about the decreasing number and the destruction of them, what we mean by that, especially in line with all this, is that the weakening of their opposition to Hashem and his ways. So we mean it in a spiritual sense. When we talk about their destruction, it's not necessarily like, oh, let's go obliterate all the people. What we mean is that we're combating, destroying, going back to what we said about the Talmud Day, we're destroying the opposition to godliness. We're destroying the enemy part of them. We want to get rid of, decrease in their opposition to godliness. Light up and bring over. That's what Beis Shammai said. We have to go like the bulls, we're going to go 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 because we're to decrease. That's step one. That is illuminating the darkness. Wherever there is light, there is no darkness. So that decreases because more light, more light, more light. The darkness is the opposition to godliness. Beis Hillel said, no, we're supposed to light 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 because we're supposed to go up in holiness. Well, that's the next step. The next step is to increase in holiness, that the nations, they're going to transform and become a vehicle for protection in holy matters. You'll see what it means here, but basically to the point where it's not just that the nations of the world are going to be like these Jews and their invisible God, and like every time we have a victory over them, it proves that their invisible God is nothing. We see that's what the Greeks wanted, get God out of the picture. It's not just that, no, we're going to convince you that there's a God we should follow, we should all lead moral lives, etc. Not just that, but you're going to come over to the side to assist in this as well. You're going to want to be part of the program. That's the increase in holiness. That's where we have all this here. Gemara, Ben Rabba, etc. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Hanei Shivim Parim Keneged Mi, Keneged Shivim Umos. Par Yechid Lama, Keneged Uma Yechida. Rabbi Elazar said, these 70 bulls sacrificed as additional offerings over the course of the 7 days of Sukkot. To what do they correspond? They correspond to 70 nations of the world, and are brought to atone for their sins and to hasten world peace. So everyone was included. Why is a single bull sacrificed on the 8th day? The 8th day, what number are we at there? There's no more of the decrease in the bulls. There's only one extra bull. Every holiday had its set amount of sacrifices. And there was kind of like a standard number that each holiday, it was about the same. Sukkot had something unique because it had these extra bulls that were brought also in this decreasing number. Shemoneh Esrei, so there was only one extra bull that was brought, in addition to the regular holiday sacrifices. What is that one? It corresponds to the singular nation, Israel. The Jewish people. We're a nation, we're a singular nation that dwells alone, etc. That's us. We see the 70 and the 1. Mashal Mach Basa V'dam Shamar Lavadav Asur Li Soda G'dala the Yom Achron Amar La'ava Asay Li Soda K'tana Kadesh Te'ehana Mimcha. The Gemara cites a parable about a king of flesh and blood, as in a parable about a human king. Translation: a king of flesh and blood who said to his servants, prepare for me a great feast that will last for several days. When the feast concluded on the last day, he said to his beloved servant, prepare for me a small feast so I can derive pleasure from you alone. As in, we had a massive party and now it's going to be only family. Now it's just us. The massive party with all the bulls, a big party, big celebration. Now we're going to have a private affair. 7 days of Sukkot, Shemoneh Esrei. God said, let's celebrate with everybody kind of thing, and now I just want you guys. Which is what Shemoneh Esrei is. Remember, the only thing we celebrate on Shemoneh Esrei is that God said stay an extra day. It's not a clouds of glory thing. It's not a taking out of Egypt thing. It's just God said stay an extra day. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Aylam Lagaim she'ibtu ve'en yodim ma she'ibtu b'zman she'beis hamikdash kayim ezbeach mechaper aleim v'achshav mi mechaper aleim. Rabbi Yochanan said, woe unto the nations of the world that lost something and do not know what they lost. When the temple is standing, the 70 bulls sacrificed on the altar during the festival of Sukkot atones for them, and now the temple is destroyed, who atones for them? Hang on a second. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Ilo hayu umasol yodim ma hayab mikdash yafalem. Kastrios hayim makifim oso kadei l'shamra. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, if the nations of the world knew how good the holy temple was for them, they would surround it with fortifications in order to guard it, armaments, etc. As in solidifying kind of the whole thing about how the 70 bulls are for the nations of the world. It was something that was done for them, and if they had only known, they wouldn't have destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. That's what the sages are saying. Not just that they wouldn't have destroyed it, but they actually would have protected it, which, starting to see the connection, that's the increase in holiness. That they would have added to the protection of the Beis HaMikdash. Because there were patrols of the Beis HaMikdash, the Kohanim, they had to patrol, they made sure nobody went where they weren't supposed to, etc. But it's saying if the nation of the world understood that this Beis HaMikdash wasn't just like the Jew place of their invisible God, and no, what we're doing here is for the whole world, This is a light for the entire world. You know the windows in the base of Mikdash, especially back in the day, the way that they would tailor the windows, because they would just cut and put a piece of glass in. So they used to make it that you'd have, let's say, a narrower opening, right, because you don't want stuff coming in, and be wider inside, because you want the light to spill out once it's in the room. So the base of Mikdash, the windows in the base of Mikdash were made opposite. Narrower inside, it went wider on the outside. Because the whole thing is that the base of Mikdash gives light unto the world. It's not taking in the light from the world, it's putting light out into the world. So if the nations had understood that, like if only they had understood this deeper thing, not only would they not have destroyed the base of Mikdash, but they would have contributed to its guardianship. They would have actually stepped forward to protect it. That's what we mean by they would become vehicles for adding to holiness. They would have been part of this. These are quotes about Mashiach's times, that they're both from prophets. One's from Tzfanya, this one. For then I will transform the peoples to serve him as one. Messianic times when everybody will be like, hey, look, it's God. This is from Isaiah, Yeshaya. That the foreigners will rise and shepherd your flocks. Not just that the other people want to be your servants, so we're going to shepherd your flocks, as in like, let us help you. We'll take your stuff on the farm so you can keep learning. Go learn some more. We'll watch things over here. That's kind of what it's saying that Messianic times are going to be like. The nations of the world, not only they're not opposing godless anymore, but they're going to want to say, how can we help? How can we expand this? How can we encourage this and really spread it out to the world? That's the transformation of darkness into light. So what are we ending off with? The punchline, the karbanos of Shmini Atzeres, really the carbon of the one bull, it's only a result of the previous day's sacrifices. It's only because we offered all those bulls and there was a big hullabaloo and the big party that the king was like, hey, why don't you stay an extra day so it could be just us? Because if it would be just us until then, we don't necessarily need the extra day. The one bull only came because we had all those other bulls. That's why we got the extra day of, hey, let's have a day of only us. This only came about because of this. That is where we can leave on a happy note. And then next time, we will continue. We'll wrap up the Maamar.